Hi everyone, this is Richard. In this video we're going to go over named constructors. Before, in a previous video, we called named constructors and generative constructors the same thing. I'm not exactly sure if they are the same thing or not. I think people are using them a little bit interchangeably, or maybe I'm just misunderstanding that. But let's go over classes and constructors one more time, okay? So I'm going to say class, let's say pet, and I'm going to say int eyes, legs, and bool tail. All right, and I'm going to create a generative constructor right inside here. This dot eyes, this dot legs, and I'm going to make the optional parameter this dot tail. Okay, but I'm going to say if tail equals null, then tail equals true. It'll just default to true if there's nothing there. So if we create the class, create the object, pet fluffy equals new pet, and we got to put in some arguments. So 2 eyes, 4 legs, and no tail. Poor Fluffy. Fluffy print fluffy dot tail. And so that would be false, right? But if I left this out, it would default to true. Okay, so I think that's nothing new. This is, I think from now on, what we'll call it is a generative constructor. Before it was called a name constructor. I'm not sure, again, the terminology, maybe it's a little bit vague to me. What since then I've read about is, for example, pet.dog. These are more named constructors. So this would be a generative constructor. Underneath there is the default constructor, and this is a named constructor. Okay. First of all, you might ask, why do you even need a generative constructor to begin with? Why don't you just use the default, right? Well, why don't you? Well, if you did that, then you would have to say fluffy dot eyes equals 2. You will use cascades. Dot legs equals 4. Dot tail equals false. So you could redefine or define some of these instance variables after you create the object. But that's making it a little harder, isn't it? Why don't you just do it within the class to make it easier to call it or to create it later? That's like bringing Fluffy home and then sticking 2 eyes on him, sticking 4 legs on him, and the tail. No. I don't want Fluffy without those things, okay? While he's at the store or at the breeders or at the kennel or at the pound, I want those eyes intact and the tail and the legs on Fluffy by the time I take him home. All right, so I want them on the animal at the time. So that's why you would create a generative constructor, just to make it easier when you create the object is going to be intact from the very beginning. Okay? 2, 3, 4. Okay? So if you want to create another, and this is probably called more of the named constructor, sorry about the confusion there. This is more of a named constructor where the syntax is class name dot something else. So pet dot dog. And so you could add parameters, or you don't have to, but I'll say this dot tail, and tail equals true. Okay, so I'm going to say new pet dot dog, and I'm going to say false. Create Fluffy new pet dot dog. Here's the named constructor. False, so false, but it's going to automatically change it to true no matter what I say. Okay, so In other words, I want a dog with a tail. I don't want a dog without a tail. No tail, no deal. Okay, so doesn't matter what I put here. Comes back true anyway. All right, and I'm just making this up. Okay, you could put anything here, and you could put the um, uh, eyes equal 3, or it's got super dog or something like that. You can always do something like that. So um, dot eyes, and you can run that. It should be actually 3. Okay. If this reminds you of something, so you have kind of a subclass within the class, it reminds me of extends. It reminds me of inheritance, right? Cat extends pet. So you can do that as well. But sometimes it's easier to put the subclass, it's not truly called a subclass, it's a named constructor inside of here. Sometimes it's easier to actually do an extends and talk about inheritance. If this is an abstract class, or maybe it's a very complex code and you don't want to introduce more constructors inside of there, you want to leave it as it is and create a new class altogether. So there are different reasons to do different things, but at the same time, these are certainly options, especially with simple type of objects we're creating, simple types of classes, okay? So I'll say class cat um, and tail equals, I'm going to say eyes equal, I only want a 3-eyed cat, okay? So here, class pet does not have a D. Oh, when you talk about this, when you are talking about inheritance, you have to have a default constructor. Okay, you can't have a generative constructor. You need the default constructor right here. All right. So there we go. You can't delete it altogether because you still need a generative constructor. Okay, but you can't put any types of variables or any types of parameters right inside of there. Okay, because if you're going to do an inheritance itself. So, okay, Fluffy equals new cat, and we can always change this to cat. We don't have to, but we can. So Fluffy dot eyes will equal 3, right? How about a Fluffy dot tail? Well, that hasn't been defined though, so it'll give you null, right? So class cat extends pet, so you can access these. They're not undefined. You can access them, legs, tail, but they just don't have any actual value to them because they haven't been initialized. Okay. However, if you want to, you can initialize this. Let's just say super dot dog. You can do that. Okay. So cat, give it a um, uh, um, let me see, tail, bool tail, and then super.dog would be a tail here as well. Okay? One required argument. Oh, right inside here. So cat equals true. I'm going to remove this part. Okay, so cat equals new cat. That's true. It goes here. Bool, true. It goes to the superclass pet dog. This dot tail, true. Sends this this goes here, so true goes to true, true goes to true, true goes to true itself. So it should be coming out as true, right? But at the same time, if you want to do dot eyes, let's just say 30. That's getting a little crazy. Let's go to 4, okay? So what's it going to do right here? So it's the superclass that gets taken over. So it shouldn't be 3, it should actually be 4 in this case, right? Wait a minute. It's actually 3. Super dot dog. Oh, I'm sorry. computer, of course, is right. I was going to say computer's right. When we actually, this is going to be the next topic, actually. Okay, so when we actually get cat, it's going to inherit this value, but you can override it. So superclass gets inherited, but then you can override it with the local variable right inside of here. So this would be 4, and this would be 3. Okay, because it inherits it down here, but then it gets taken up and changed right down here. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Named constructors, generative constructors, you can introduce variables or you can introduce parameters into your class. The named constructor is the class dot something else, and then you can use to create different objects, which is a way of doing the class extends itself. All right. In the next video, why don't we go over initializers? That's what the colon actually is. I don't think I explained that well before. Let me try to go over that again in the next video. Okay. So if there's any questions, please feel free to leave a comment in the comments section. Thanks. Bye.